Yeah. Wanna tell me what I'm here for?
The power of the GL first as foretold by Joshua through the pooling of my LD. Hey y'all, Jin here, and how could I not do a how to play on a brand new GL first character with a very interesting kit to say the least? So here it is. I don't usually shill, but these videos do take a lot of time and effort, so if you like what you see, please do consider subbing if you're not already, and let's reach that 4K. Alright, as usual with these, I will be covering his full kit, its pros and cons, giving my thoughts and recommendations on how to build him and use him, as well as a commentated showcase Lufenia Run right after, so timestamps will be below if you want to jump around. I did do an impromptu pool battle with Lufenia for his LD, so you can go check that out as well. But by the way, a massive shout out to the Tonberry Troupe for getting out his infographics so fast. The link to their website and the infographic will be below. Me, Resfoina, Liz87, the Broadway saying we were on the latest episode of our Fireside Chat on Liz87's Twitch discussing Cor, and that episode will be on YouTube as well. But yeah, Resfoina mentioned that the Tonberry Troupe had already had its infographic out and the event had just been released, so that's insane. Mad props to them. Meanwhile, here I am, late on the how to play as usual. Alright, so without further ado, let's dive right into his base kit first. His skill 1, Moonlit Dawn, batteries the party by 155% attack into a 3 Brave HP attack followed by a 4 Brave HP attack with 50% splash. His skill 2, Snowbreak, batteries the party by 105% attack into a 2 AoE Brave split HP attack followed by a 3 AoE Brave split HP attack and grants him the unique buff Crown's Guard Warrior for 8 turns, which he also starts out with. That gives him a 50% attack up and 60% max Brave up. Anytime either of these two skills are used, you will be prompted to select an ally to give his unique buff Oath of Absolute Defense for 6 turns to, which grants attack and max Brave up 40%, defense up 30%, reduces Brave damage taken by 80%, and HP damage taken by 20%, while preventing break from Brave hits on top of this, and this buff will be removed from another ally if they had it on, essentially allowing him to just keep this buff on one ally at a time. His Brave Plus is a 3 AoE Brave hit that batteries the party 7% attack. His HP++ is a Brave gain of 100% attack into a 2 Brave HP attack that batteries the party by 20% HP damage dealt. His EX ability Lion's Roar is a 5 AoE Brave 100% AoE HP attack that is at a normal EX charge and gives him his important self-unique buff, 1 of Blue Size 3 for 8 turns. This buff works similarly to the one he gives allies, gives him attack up 40% and max Brave up 50%, reduces Brave damage taken by 80% and HP damage taken by 20% and prevents break from Brave hits. His LD ability, Reflorescer, or however you say it, is an instant turn 7 Brave HP attack with 30% Brave refund of HP damage dealt into a 5 AoE Brave split HP attack that grants him 10 stacks, which is the max of his overhead buff, King's Power Within. And while at 10 stacks of his overhead buff, he gains an upgraded HP+, Reaper Scale. That is also an instant turn that extends all his buffs by 1, and it's a free turn as well. So essentially you can use it without penalty, it's just free damage, free turn. It is a 2 AoE Brave split HP attack executed 3 times with 10% Brave refund of HP damage dealt after each HP attack, and this deals Rainbow Brave damage. He will be the first unit that we get to see on GL with Rainbow Brave damage, which essentially means it is the maximum amount of Brave damage that can be dealt, and it ignores anything that the enemy has, Brave damage reduction, whatever, and after its use, his stacks are reset to 0. Now, how to gain these stacks. That's where his extra attack comes in, which I would be referring to as his preemptive attack, since it acts prior to other actions. His preemptive attack is a 3 AoE Brave split HP attack that refunds Brave of 30% HP damage dealt. Each time he does his preemptive attack, he will gain a stack of his overhead buff, so 10 such attacks will give him access to Reaper Scale again without having to use his LD. And there are 4 ways to trigger his preemptive attack before an action is taken, which Josh did a good job going over it on the community stream. So the first instance it will trigger is when an ally with his buff does any Brave or HP attack. It could even be an AA as well, as long as that AA attacks an enemy. Number 2 condition, Cor with his EX buff does any Brave or HP attack. Number 3, an enemy takes an action that is targeting an ally with his buff. The enemy can be paralyzed or have terror inflicted. It still works, he'll still do the preemptive attack. Number 4, an enemy takes an action while they're targeting Cor and he has his EX buff on. So inversely, situations his preemptive attack does not trigger would be number 1, an ally does not have his buff or does not do any attack of any kind. Number 2, Cor does not have his EX buff up or does not do any attack of any kind, so essentially it's his AA or call abilities. And number 3, an enemy is not targeting either Cor or an ally with his buff and takes an action. So there are definitely more situations in which his preemptive attack will trigger than not. And so once you know these, it's always best to try to make sure it triggers as much as possible. So speaking of his AA earlier, his AA is pretty freaking great also. 10% attack, max brave boost to the whole party. For 5 turns, he has 2 of them. If you somehow had a free ability from like a OK Call and you use that there, he can give 10% attack and max brave boost to the whole party for 15 turns. Fantastic. His A sphere, also quite great. It increases physical attack by 3% when breaking or attacking a broken target, and up to 5 times, so 15% in total. And that's pretty much permanent once it's reached, so it's always nice that you don't have to worry about it once it's reached. But that being said, I'd say don't give it to him. He batteries often based on attack, and attack is treated separately from physical attack, so you can save his sphere for someone else and give him regular attack spheres. So like King here is best for him, 20% when breaking, and he can break enemies plenty with all his preemptive attacks, especially since he is the one going first all the time. King and Noel are the highest attack spheres, but I did give Noel on Tifa, so I'm just going to give him Garland here, which gives 10% attack instead. Brave damage sphere is also good for him. Try to maximize his preemptive attacks, so brave damage obviously will be great there. D sphere boost attack as usual. Hope would be fantastic, but I already used Hope on Lightning, so I prioritize my faves. So Ash, his sphere, 5% attack, perfectly fine for the party. And for arts, you can never have enough attack if that wasn't already clear, so you're going to want triple 108s, and you're going to want C50s for secondaries, which further increases attack by 5% and max brave by 5% when he has his skill 2 buff on, which should be all the time. 330, that would be a distant third. It's okay, but definitely you want more attack as possible. So he's hitting as hard as he can every time he does a preemptive attack. He also has the attack armor, which is fantastic, so hell yeah, definitely get that at least his base high armor for him. This will increase his brave and HP damage potential for all those attacks. And I did actually mention on Fireside that I would withhold bluing him over faves, bluing his armor, since those resources are very rare. But after using him, I couldn't help myself, got into the hype. Especially since I could do more than I thought, since I only had done Sephiroth and Tifa up to this point, and I want to maximize his preemptive attacks as much as possible. That's the reason I gave him full spheres, and now I give him blue armor as well. See how much damage he can keep doing for as long as possible. Alright, so how to play Cor. He always opens up with consecutive turns with a free ability directly into the EX. Similar to Lightning, Skill 1 is better for single target shaving and single target enemies. Skill 2 is better for AoE shaving and upkeeping his Crown's Guard buff. So you can open up with whichever one you'd rather have more of by the end of the fight, but his longevity will last a long time before you even start worrying about running out of skills, so it's really not a big deal. Just make sure to select the party member you want to attack a lot with, or that the enemies closest to acting are targeting that ally. And this is something you'll have to check each time you want to use either of his 2 skills. And you also use either skill when you have the intention of switching the buff to another ally. So yeah, after his first free ability, go straight into his EX, which gives him his important self buff. Once you do this simple opening step, just skill into EX, he's already good to go. Now you just need to make sure to maintain all his buffs, especially his EX buff and ally buff on the ideal ally to keep them number 1 protected, but also mainly upkeep his preemptive attacks at all times. And keep in mind his skill 1 does not give him his Crown's Guard buff, it's only his skill 2. Also, if the ally with his buff takes a ton of turns, you have to keep using his skills to make sure it's refreshed often enough on that ally. And don't let them take too many turns before Cor can go, so like Terra for example, don't keep spamming her LDs because she'll run out of the buff. AAs that deal brave or HP attacks can trigger his preemptive attack like El Narsh's, Kadash, Kurosame, etc. but not calls, so a unit, as long as they have enough turns left on the buff, you can choose to spam their AA as long as it's attacking an enemy, so that you can get some brave shaving first from Cor before they go, or just free extra damage. Always keep in mind if he will do his preemptive attack or not before you or an enemy's turn, so you're not surprised if he steals a break from your lightning or something. All the tricks of playing his kit is essentially trying to have him trigger his preemptive attack as much as possible. If you bring units like Eldnarsh, you do want the buff on Eldnarsh, obviously with lock or the targeting him, and have the enemies take as many turns as possible so that you have all those warps and all those preemptive attacks together, just all free damage. And that would be the same idea with teams with counter units. Let the enemies keep going, and hopefully you're having all these counters and preemptive attacks going at the same time. He works really well with tanks. You bring a tank like Warrior of Light, you want the buff on Warrior of Light obviously, or your tank, and it doesn't really matter what you or the enemies do, you'll probably just never die unless it's to the orb. It's so ridiculous. So many different styles of team compositions he works wonders with. You just gotta adjust his playstyle a bit to get as many preemptive attacks as possible. It's mainly about upkeeping his ally's buff on the correct ally. And depending on the team, you want to let the enemies keep taking turns or not. It's up to the team composition. It's just mostly the more preemptive attacks he gets, the more free damage you get, the faster his stacks go up. And then he'll reach 10, and you can try to use his Reaper's Gale the moment he's at 10 stacks as fast as possible so he can start rebuilding stacks again. And speaking of like for his LD use, you don't need to use his LD until you want to, which generally can just be for huge damage windows since he can take many consecutive turns with it. But ideally always wait to use his LD when his stacks are quite low, or you just use Reaper's Gale. Otherwise you can wait for him to get 10 stacks / Reaper's Gale naturally, then you can use the LD after. So pretty much you can essentially use Reaper's Gale into LD, into Reaper's Gale, into LD, then Reaper's, then LD, then Reaper's again. And that damage window would be absolute nuts. Disgusting damage if you set it up with like HP damage up calls or units as well, or burst effects, etc. You know, you just need to make sure his EX buff is up so he doesn't need refreshing during it. But yeah, that's the extreme version of his burst damage window potential. Otherwise, you can just throw in an LD here or there whenever you've just used Reaper's Gale. So Reaper's into LD, into another Reaper's, then into a Skiller's EX is generally what I would do for a normal play. Also, some quick tips for setting up a burst phase with Cor in the field. Aside from the standard AAs, friend burst effect, and or call abilities that you would set up normally for any burst phase, make sure Cor gave them the buff, and ideally try to have Cor be at a low amount or at 0 stacks of his overhead buff, as you will be getting a bunch of easy free stacks during the burst phase. Since especially even the burst finisher triggers the preemptive attack, so you got 6 stacks right there just from the burst alone. Also, there's actually a loophole you can abuse to put his buff on both your allies. So all you need to do is put it on the unit you plan to switch out for a friend, and while they're out, put his buff on your other party member. Then when your ally comes back in, you can just avoid using skill 1 or skill 2, just spam HP plus until one of your allies has run out of the buff. Just make sure to refresh your skill 2 buff and the buff on the party member left in just before your friend unit leaves. That way you can make the best of those buffs. Alright, moving on. I'm going to start with the cons for Cor since there actually really aren't that much. The main one is, as fights get harder moving forward, I imagine if he's doing shit damage, his preemptive attacks won't be that worthwhile, so you should be team building properly to make sure he's doing good enough damage on those. And also depending on how you play, if you're not maximizing his amount of preemptive attacks, then he may not bring good enough damage either. Also, an obvious con is his ally buff can only be on one at a time. You know, usually if you're not abusing that friend unit loophole. And you have to keep selecting the unit each time you use his skills, which can be annoying. And that buff for his allies is actually on the ally themselves, so any unit taking a bunch of turns will need to be rebuffed by Cor, unlike Yang's LD buff, for example, which is just on Yang. And lastly, units looking for breaks will encounter the issue of him stealing them all, since he will be taking a bunch of preemptive attacks, which you want him to, so yeah, there won't be that many breaks to go around with him on the team. But units that re-break or want units broken, like Noel will actually be really great for him. Really great pairing because Noel also has some aura of his own, deals massive DPS, has follow-ups of his own once enemies broken. I'm on a tangent. Okay, yeah. Alright, on to his pros. So many of them. So many pros. My god, this guy. I'm probably going to forget some, but first off, he has longevity up the wazoo, so he starts with a free skill that goes into a charged EX with already a bunch of skills, 20 in total with his LD. He has a very relevant HP plus when taking into account his preemptive attack before it all the time. And we're not talking about his free instant damage Reaper's Gale HP plus he gets every time at 10 stacks, and that does a max Brave Rainbow damage and pretty damn fast EX to boot since it has a normal charge. All his buffs have a very decent duration as well. The lowest is his 6-turn buff on allies, which he does keep refreshing anyways with his skills, so you really can have him go on forever essentially. He also batteries the party via his 2 skills and his HP plus and Brave plus. And yeah, speaking of his Brave plus, since he has a preemptive attack, he will do an HP attack anyways, but then he'll retain his Brave from the Brave attack after, which will be great for going into a launch as well. So yeah, all his whole kit has utility. He's literally unbreakable, like literally unbreakable, and can make another ally unbreakable. So aside from already reducing 80% Brave damage and 20% HP damage taken, and if they can somehow get past your Brave reduction, assuming you weren't at 0 Brave, you still can't be broken, or the ally, with his buff. And then that Brave reduction also helps to just reduce them from gaining more Brave, so that their HP tax will be essentially very little if they rely on Brave shaving And that's aside from his already 20% HP damage reduced. And then because of his preemptive attacks and how often they are, he just has great Brave control. Before he goes, before an ally with his buff goes, before enemies go that are targeting him or an ally with the buff, he just shave him down. He'll shave him down first. If you didn't shave an enemy down in time, no problem, as long as they're targeting the right ally or him. An ally needs some help shaving or doesn't even shave at all with their attack, no problem, as long as they have his buff and the enemy is targeting them. So yeah, every time a Cor takes an action, don't mind if he just takes a preemptive attack every time he does a single attack. You get the gist. So many ways to trigger his additional attack for free damage, and they even trigger during the burst and the burst finisher as well. And then these buffs are just really easy to upkeep as well. And that's just talking about like his support and off-turn damage side. He can also have a huge burst damage window for himself, as mentioned when going over his LDUs. His skills are very well balanced, with skill 1 being single target with 2 HP attacks and splash, while his skill 2 has the AoE Brave Shave with 2 HP attacks as well. So with high Brave or not, he uses Brave efficiently. He fits into so many different team comps and playstyles, and he also brings like pretty damn decent auras that freaking include both HP and Brave damage up, albeit they're both only 10%, but damn, that's something like many full supports wish they could have. And he also gives 60% attack up, 60% max Brave up, 30% defense up, 30% overflow stolen up, and that's all just his freaking auras for the party. Jeez, not even including the buff he puts on a single ally, which is literally the only buff slot he takes on any ally, and they're all unique buffs, so he's very open to taking and allowing buffs to be given as well. He has even a great party aura for his AA, 10% attack to both attack and max Brave for 5 turns each. It doesn't even stop there, even his calls are pretty solid. Regular call gives the user 6 turns of that 80% Brave damage and 20% HP damage reduction, and they cannot be broken by Brave attacks either, so 6 turns of an ally being unbreakable just from his regular call can be very useful for fights where getting broken can lead to death. LD call gives 40% max Brave and attack up, and 30% overflow stolen up to the whole party for 4 turns as well. Is that enough? Is that enough pros for him? I'm probably even missing stuff, but yeah, I think that's still plenty. If he had healing as well, then it'd just be like, man, what the hell? Final thoughts, I'll just say it flat out if it wasn't obvious before. As long as you don't absolutely hate his guts, you should try to grab him if you can, however you can. Pity does exist, and he's definitely pity worthy. Just skip some upcoming units if you have to. There's Brothers coming up, perfect timing for Brothers to come up. You get 40k gems there, 400 tickets, although I would just suggest if you're trying to go for him, just go gems. Use the 40k gems, and hopefully you had more than 30k gems before his banner started as well, then you're set. That's it, 70k gems right there. Like, I don't even care for him as a character from Final Fantasy 15 that much. I mean, he was cool, but it's whatever. But man, I love his kit. Very interesting, very fun to play, and just bonus points for it being busted as well. So he'll be able to last into Lufenia Plus with his ridiculous off-turn damage potential, his party protection, and his longevity. Not to talk about fights not accounting for him just because he's a GL first. And he has pretty decent auras as well for a unit that does all that he does, which includes both Brave and HP damage up for the party. I'm personally curious to see how long he can go, hence my full spearing and blue armoring of him. I just wanted to maximize his longevity and use as being a GL first character. I always like to run GL first just because there exists no runs with him in JP, and he goes so well with all sorts of playstyles. Just make sure you have some additional auras and can take care of the orb, then you're set. And any elemental orb, you just put someone, enchant him, and done. All his preemptive attacks will up that elemental orb. Tanks obviously go well with him, counter units go well with him, turn stealing units go well with him. Even delay units go fine with him since he gets his preemptive attack prior to his own turn and that ally's turn. And you can still abuse that mechanic to get the buff on both of your allies as well. A unit like Iroha can allow him to retain even more Brave for his preemptive attacks, and obviously battery units as well help to maximize all that off-turn damage. So anyone wanting to do a Cor saga, you will have a pretty easy time, I'm guessing. It's more of a question of who doesn't go well with him, which mostly would revolve around putting the buff on the wrong units and not having the preemptive attack go off as much. And yeah, essentially the main things that will work against him in hard fights are just bad team composition and play, because as long as you're making sure he does enough damage from those preemptive attacks and that they go off a lot and you have some control of the orb, then the fight shouldn't be too bad. So just make sure you have enough auras, Peril Enchant, defense down, HP damage up, Brave damage up, etc. to maximize his damage potential. And we have a ton of options if you've been playing a lot enough. he'll be more than fine, and he can help drastically reduce turn counts with all that free damage. He's just really enjoyable to use with how many ways you want to tinker with him to make him busted, and that definitely falls into my wheelhouse of fun units to use. And I think he will be worth the investment because he can be and will be useful for a long time if you build your teams with him in mind and how you plan to exploit his preemptive attacks on those teams. You might find him underwhelming only if you're not properly maximizing his off-turn damage. But otherwise, yeah, thank you Square for this man. Alright, okay, finally done. I tried to cover all the main stuff, so hopefully I didn't miss too much. I don't think I'm overhyping him because I have like zero connection to the character himself. It's just mainly, this is his kit and it's pretty busted. So yeah, please feel free to leave in the comments anything you think I missed or got incorrect, since I have only had like a day to play around with him. And that didn't even include his Lufenia, which I'm about to run right now, but I do think this video will definitely help those looking to maximize their use of Cor. So yeah, speaking of the Lufenia, time for my showcase run. I actually thought of about many teams to try to showcase him with. Wasn't sure which one. There's 0 turns, there's no boss acts, there's duos, there's counters, there's turn stealers. Just so many options, which is what makes him so great. So he can just fit into whatever playstyle we'd like to do. But in the end, I'm just going to see how many follow-ups we can do. Yeah, so that's the team here. Follow-ups galore. And then if this also gives me a no boss act run, then that could be expected as well. Check out what this enemy does. Alright, so the orb triggers below 50%. You need to do additional attack to increase the orb count. Wow, okay, that's quite the catering to a specific unit. I wonder who. Alright, we should have 0 problems with that orb, obviously. Actually, like, he works really well with the Sephiroth burst effect, which you can delay quite badly an enemy. When the enemies go, he will break them before they can go. So it's pretty funny, actually. Why don't we just showcase that real quick, I guess. It's not my friend. I don't see any blue Sephiroths. Shame. Shame on my friends list. Alright, so let's just quickly set up. So calls, he would not do anything anyways, even if he was set up. So we'll let B go, no problem with that. We'll go before A. He even has a counter, it's hilarious. Alright, they're both attacking Noctis too, which is kind of nice. Let's just go ahead and drop all the stacks. Might as well just drop all the stacks, otherwise Kurosami's Call is nice to just put one down, the enemies can go and increase stacks and also get Cor's additional attack to go as well, so. Let's go ahead and we'll go with the AoE shave. Give Noctis obviously. And we'll go into the EX. I want to stay for an A, so we'll ignore B's launch anyways. So. Alright, let's just go ahead and give Noctis his AA. I didn't really want Cor acting again, so we will go ahead and, yeah. use my EX. B is just gonna die from natural causes. We'll just ignore him. And we'll go the warp strike here. And we'll get our shooting star back to plus version. I haven't used Noctis for a while until this event, really. It's always been pretty fun to use him. Now we all have to stay in front of A. No problem with the Noctis buff. And I love how his additional attack goes with the burst finisher as well. Woof! That is a lot of damage. And now anything we do, we stay in front. So I have 6 stacks already free from the burst. Let's go ahead and we'll use Moonlight Dawn, a single target. We'll just reapply it to Noctis. We'll get to Reaper's Gale naturally first. Here are all the counters. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Let's go ahead and since we're gonna stay in front anyways, let's just go ahead and get this to the plus version. I don't really want to jump up. I have Noctis' buff, so I'll use kick. All the follow-ups. All the follow-ups. Alright. We got one more Noctis buff. And we are almost at 10 stacks, so we can do a bunch of damage soon. Alright, yeah, I don't need to apply the LD buff just yet. Maybe I should launch there though. Oh yeah, we want to reapply this obviously. So we're on turn 2, and he's at 60% health. Gotta love it. We're at naturally Reaper's Gale. Got the rainbow damage, here we go. And now let's just do some crazy burst damage while we're at it. Let's go ahead and we'll get ourselves... we'll use that at the end. I'm doing max damage anyways. So we're just gonna use all his instant abilities while Noctis Burst still up. This is sad, I'm sorry. There's not even a proper support in this team. The only, Noctis barely gives any auras, and most of the auras are from synergy stats and Cor and all the calls, obviously. This is wrong. So I am keeping an eye on his EX buff. He won't do his additional attack if I let it drop. But we should be good for the last LD and Reaper's Gale, then into the EX. Let's check. Need a quality of life. Yep, Crown's Guard Warrior is the one that needs refreshing, so we can go Reaper's Gale. Reaper's Gale extends his buff, so we're all good. We're just gonna use the EX now. I'm not gonna use the AA just because I don't want his other buff falling off. Is that enough damage in 6 turns? I think it's pretty good damage. Pretty good damage for 6 turns. Let's go ahead and launch. That's the last of my burst effect there. Let's get his EX buff on. So let's showcase Sephiroth's burst effect. Noctis has actually that buff from Cor as well. So we can give Yang one now to abuse a friend. Loophole. So we're going to summon here. And let's go ahead and use my LD. So we're gonna have to refresh this buff. We'll give it to Yang now. So now both my allies have that buff. So this is when Cor is going to be the one breaking that. And I only have 2 more turns with my friend anyways. So he's on the LDs. And he's just getting sent back. We'll just use a Snow Break, I guess, because I haven't really used it much, but single target, generally skill 1 is better. Snow Break is more for AoE shaving. Gotta get my LD buff up first. So this is gonna be when Noctis comes back, and they both have the buff from Cor, which is hilarious. Especially if like enemies do an all attack. So everything that we all do, we get additional attack now. Is that my last? That is my last. That's Yang's last follow-up. But we got the follow-ups from Cor, so we got Reaper's Gale naturally there. And whatever. Moonlight Dawn. Actually, no, we don't want to do that. What am I talking about? We want to keep the buffs on both my allies. Even though he's pretty much dead anyways. Free ability. Let's go ahead, give ourselves no turn count abilities. I could have spammed that earlier to lessen the turn count a bit, but it's all good. Isn't that hilarious? Both of them having his buff. The HP attack already does a shit ton of damage. This will be our final attack. Nice finish off in style. The launch as well. Everyone had too many abilities left. Oh my god, he survived. How is that possible? Well, Cor gets to finish it off. We'll do it with an actual ability. Goodbye. So, obviously he's synergy. Obviously this event was catered to him. We didn't have to think about the orb once, but wow. That was just destruction. Absolute destruction. But yeah, that is a showcase of how you can abuse his LD in free turns, instant turns, how you can abuse him with other follow-ups like Noctis' burst effect, and how you can do the friend abuse. You got his buff on both of your allies. So yeah, this is the ideal way to just spam as many follow-ups, as many preemptive attacks as you can. And yeah, that boss melted. It was done in 15 turns. I wasn't really paying attention to trying to keep a low turn count. Like if I did, I would have used the Noctis LD more, which allows the allies to not be counted towards the turn count, but doesn't matter. 15 turns, still pretty impressive. Cor, definitely impressive. I hope this video helps, and yeah, subscribe if you enjoy this content, and definitely helps me out because these do take time. But I do it just to try to help people, and I hope it did. I assume we're gonna see tons of Cor runs from so many people already. I've done this video just like a day and a half late, and he's already like 10,000 videos of him. Obviously I'm exaggerating, but there's just so many videos already on him. So yeah, definitely check out other people's as well. And if you got him, or if you plan on getting him, I hope he serves you well. Alright, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.